The feud between Trump and Thomas Massie, because I know you guys are going to feel equally as strongly about this. So this is historical. This ignited in March of 2020 when Massie forced a roll call vote on the $2.2 trillion CARES Act, the COVID-19 package, which prompted Trump to label him a third-rate grandstander, push for his ousting. And their clash has subsequently escalated now with his war powers, the Iran strikes notably, major spending bills. And Trump has continued to call him a loser, and he is now funding his primary challengers. So, Amy, can you give us the details on the latest with this one?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to go into the history because it wasn't always just Trump hating on Massie. He actually did a pretty steep U-turn back in 2022. But to open this up, Nat, could we please pull up the post that Thomas Massie made where he is sharing Trump's, I believe it was a truth post, where he hashtags here sassy with Massie. He says, Donald Trump declared so much war on me today, it should require an act of Congress. And the reason why he said that was because of the war resolution that Massie was trying to push, which would actually mandate a vote by Congress in order for us to go into this war. So he's using that same verbiage here in this post when Trump absolutely slammed him for suggesting that this should be invoked. He says Congressman Thomas Massie of Kentucky is not MAGA, even though he likes to say he is. He essentially says that he votes no on every single thing. He calls him a Rand Paul Jr., although maybe Trump isn't really up to speed on all the great things that Rand has done kind of recently. It may be a little bit more of a compliment than what he realizes. Obviously, a lot of ad homs. He calls him a loser, things like this. But it really wasn't always this way. Much like Jillian mentioned, yeah, Trump took gripe with Massie back when he opposed the massive COVID stimulus package. And he didn't really just necessarily oppose it straight up, but like Jillian mentioned, all he wanted was actual debate about it. He wanted a floor vote, and he wanted people to go on the record to determine whether or not they had actually learned enough about what was in this bill and the ramifications that it would have to be able to make an informed decision. And he made many of them go on the record. Turns out none of them really knew, honestly. And that's the issue within Congress, is there are so many yes men. There's so many people who are voting based on dollars that are put in their pocket or trying to be a populist versus actually voting with their conscience. And in my opinion, Thomas Massie is one of the only men in Congress today who is still doing this. He is my favorite congressman by absolutely miles. So again, 2020, they had that falling out. In 2022, when Trump perceived that Massie fell in line with him, he actually did a complete 180. And with that, Nat, we can actually pull up the second asset, which is Trump's tweet in 2022, giving Massie his complete and full endorsement. In fact, he actually called him a conservative warrior, right? So I'm really not sure which one it is. Nat, if you can't pull it up, that's okay. I mean, we basically just described it in a nutshell. There we go. We scroll down just a little bit here. We can read what Trump said. Congressman Thomas Massie is a conservative warrior for Kentucky's 4th District, an MIT graduate, first-rate defender of the Constitution. He fights to protect your liberties, especially with the First and Second Amendments. Now, we started to see their relationship strain again when Massie started to make some very reasonable objections to the big, beautiful bill. We all know there are great things inside of that bill. And a part of it is really Trump just fulfilling his mandate. He ran on certain principles. That's the reason why some people voted for him. And a lot of that had to do with the economy, with the jobs market. Renewing the 2017 tax cuts, no tax on tips, no tax on overtimes. But as we all know, with these omnibus bills, with these massive bills, there's always some nefarious things that are snuck in. And Thomas Massie was one of the only people who had a backbone to actually speak up about it. We can go ahead and play this third video, please, Nat, which is him giving a very clear, direct message that honestly does not take an economist or a political expert to be able to understand.
Well, I'd love to stand here and tell the American people, we can cut your taxes and we can increase spending and everything's going to be just fine. But I can't do that because I'm here to deliver a dose of reality. This bill dramatically increases deficits in the near term, but promises our government will be fiscally responsible 5 years from now. Where have we heard that before? How do you bind a future Congress to these promises? This bill is a debt bomb ticking. Congress can do funny math, fantasy math, if it wants, but bond investors don't. And this week, they sent us a message. Moody's downgraded our credit rating, and the bond investors who buy our debt and finance our debt demanded higher interest rates on the 10-year note, the 20-year note, and the 30-year note. What does this mean? Very soon, the government will be paying $16,000 of interest alone per U.S. family. And what are we telling them? Instead of taking care of that problem, we're going to give you a $1,600 tax break. Under the taxing and spending levels in this bill, we're going to rack up, the authors say, $20 trillion of new debt over the next 10 years. I'm telling you, it's closer to 30.
You guys get the picture. So it's like Trump is coming after this guy now. He is trying to primary him. He's launching a MAGA PAC and backing his opponent. He has committed to $1 million in ad buys to try to get Massie out of office. And again, it's largely due to his objections to the big, beautiful bill, and then largely this war resolution that he's trying to push through. And I'll admit, the war resolution is an optics nightmare. I mean, the people that he's aligned with on the left, it doesn't necessarily look good for him, like optics-wise. So I get why that's like low-hanging fruit for Trump to be able to attack. But this is a man of principle. And just making my final thoughts, one thing we all criticize, everyone on the right, was the woke left and their ability to be able to cancel people because they did not agree with what they're saying. After years of us giving them shit, sorry for swearing, for doing that, why are we turning around and doing the exact same thing to one of the only men in office who actually have principle, a backbone, and is not afraid of going against the populist opinion? And one thing you can't say about Thomas Massie is that he's inconsistent. He has been consistent his entire political career. He's always held these opinions. He's always held these values. So for me, I'm just, as much as I love Trump and I've stuck up for Trump in many circumstances, right? Even at personal cost, before it was popular to support him. This is one thing I can absolutely not back him on. I am a 100% Thomas Massie stan. So that's my opinion. Curious to know your guys' thoughts.
Amy, I love that. And before I get into it, I just want to say Thomas Massie has had one of the most serious glow-ups of any politician I've ever seen. The guy looks good these days. He's really coming into his own. Right, Amy?
Oh my God.
Also, Amy, I am totally with you on this. I actually don't think supporting Massie is being anti-Trump. I think this is encouraging Trump to remain Trump and to adhere to his MAGA America First principles. We cannot afford to sustain more debt. We cannot be adding trillions of dollars to $33 trillion in debt. It's just completely unsustainable. And to pretend otherwise is just naivete. And I'm actually glad to see, although I have obviously issues with the Democratic side, I'm glad to see there has to be reforms to the big, beautiful bill because the Senate parliamentarian isn't going to let it move forward and isn't going to let it proceed to just a majority vote. It's going to have to reach a 60 vote threshold now. But right now, the bill is untenable as it stands because we have not made the cuts necessary. We have not fully implemented the cuts that Trump promised and got him elected to office. Right now, the situation is absolutely untenable. We need to implement. I know, Anna, you disagree with me on this, but I think we should implement more stringent work requirements to ensure the longevity of our social programs and to make sure that it truly goes to the most vulnerable rather than able-bodied men or women who can work and choose not to.
Okay, Dave,
let me jump in real quick because I have to respond to that. Listen, when there's no debate about spending tens of billions of dollars on dropping bombs in the Middle East, and no one's talking about how much that has contributed to our national debt, it makes me sick to hear anyone target the most vulnerable people living in poverty and like defame them as lazy bums who are just like living off government cheese because they don't want to work. But putting that aside, in regard to Massie working with Democrats, I think that's a good thing. Honestly, at this moment, Congress is so useless because of the partisan divides and the unwillingness to work together, even when the two parties or members of both parties find common ground on an issue. When it comes to the War Powers Act, I think that if there is common ground with some Democrats, I'm happy to see Massie work with them willingly because that benefits the country. But in regard to Massie, look, I have a lot of disagreement with his perspectives on, our social safety net, for instance. However, one of the hardest things to find in Congress is a genuine, sincere, and principled politician that operates based on his values as opposed to what's convenient for him at any given moment. That's why you see all this flip-flopping and backpedaling and all this nonsense in Congress. You see congressmen and women basically carry out the best interests of their donors as opposed to the best interests of their constituents. But that is not the case with Massie. I might have sincere disagreements with him on some policies, but at least I know that he's good faith. And I know that he's not going to co-sign on policies that are going to cost more, damage the country, goad us into wars that we don't need to fight. And I really do respect the man because despite all the pressure that he's faced as a result of his disagreements with Donald Trump, he remains strong, steadfast, and he continues to be led by his values. That's something admirable. And I hope that he remains in office because we need people like that in Congress.
I actually absolutely agree. We need accountability.
Listen to me. I told all of you that we were going to Dave after the intro. Dave, what do you think?
Well, look, those were all good points being made. I'd say on some basic level, I think we all know, look, obviously, Donald Trump wants to get this bill passed. That is the agenda of the president. You got a member of your own party who is voting no on that. So obviously you understand where there's going to be some friction there. Donald Trump, the amount of venom that he's been spewing at Thomas Massie. I mean, it's like the guy was framed for treason by his own intelligence agencies, and I've never seen him spew this much venom for any individual there. But he's doing it for Thomas Massie, who everybody knows, however you feel about it. So there'd be 2 points here. Number one, however you feel about it, everybody here knows, and everyone in the country knows, if a Democrat had proposed this spending bill, if any other Republican president had opposed this spending bill and Thomas Massie's in the Congress, Thomas Massie's a no vote on that. This is what he believes in. And so you have one guy who is smearing another guy purely for political reasons. And then you have one guy who's standing up for principles. And so I think it's pretty easy to know whose side you should be on there. But then the other point there is that on the substance of the issue, Thomas Massie is just completely right. And I mean, it's insane that this is even a debate to be had. The U.S. federal government is the biggest organization in the history of the world, spending over $7 trillion a year. And this, it's funny because oftentimes there'll be kind of like these debates where say someone like me and Anna might have a disagreement where I believe in a laissez-faire free market and she believes more in some redistributive policies that take from the wealthiest and give to the people who have the least. But objectively speaking, what our federal government is a giant redistribution scheme that takes from the working and poor and middle class and gives to the super connected billionaire class. And it's the most insane thing in the world. Nobody can defend it. And this is how it works, through this gigantic government spending and these monstrosity 2,000-3,000 page bills that are not. Listen, the richest counties in the United States of America, it's something like either 9 or 10 out of the top 13 are the suburbs of Washington, D.C. And why is that? It's not because we have great big factories that are making things that people want to buy in Virginia. It's because these are the politically connected. And that's where the money goes. They suck $7 trillion a year out of the actual productive economy and hand it off to their buddies. And don't get me wrong, there are some crumbs that get left down to a mom who needs hip surgery or something like that. But it is pennies compared to the trillions of dollars that get passed out. All the richest counties, they're right outside Washington, D.C. and right outside of New York City, which some people may think that the whole financial casino system is capitalism, but it's a big government scheme. It's a central bank that gives out money for free to their member banks who then loan it at interest to the American people. And so I think what Thomas Massie and what a lot of Trump supporters who are sympathetic to him are saying is that it's like, look, you launched this whole DOGE initiative. You made up a fake government department where you said we were going to be cutting trillions of dollars out of this insanely bloated budget. And then when it comes time for a spending bill, all of those cuts are gone, and it's just going to blow up the budget in the next few years. And Thomas Massie's absolutely right. It's all this tricky accounting. But yeah, in 5 years, that future Congress, they'll start showing fiscal restraint. There's no way to guarantee that or to bind them to that. And so I think the point was like, look, you've got this DOGE initiative that was very popular with the American people. You've got this way overbloated government. The Republicans now control the presidency, the House, the Senate, and the Supreme Court. I mean, if we can't get some government spending now, then just at least come out and admit it, Republicans, that none of you actually believe in small government. None of you actually believe in any of this fiscal restraint. And Donald Trump was uniquely in a position where he really could have gotten anything he wanted out of this spending bill. I mean, Donald Trump is so popular amongst Republicans that he can put such enormous pressure on the lawmakers to sign his bill. He could have presented a bill to Congress and insisted that all the Republicans vote on it and primaried the ones who didn't. But instead, he's primarying Thomas Massie for being the only honest one. So I agree. I think he's the best member of Congress and also just like an excellent human being. And I just think, honestly, I think Donald Trump has no principles when it comes to this sort of thing.
Dave, I agree with what you're saying, but I think we can get more specific on who's actually responsible. And it's a military industrial complex. And it ties back to what we were talking about before. These neocons and these defense contractors are breathing down Trump's neck and everybody else in Washington begging, salivating at the prospect of another war. So it's a Lockheed Martins of the world. And these are the people responsible. They have American blood on their fingers because they want to perpetuate forever wars and regime change wars. It's their bread and butter. It's how they pay for their yachts and mega mansions.
Well, then stop sounding so much like him on Iran.
No, I'm just saying that Iran is a nuclear threat. I can hold, if they're not mutually exclusive thoughts here.
No, I guess they're not mutually exclusive, but it's just it's their made up propaganda, and then you're talking about how much blood they got on their hands. But yeah, well, look, I mean, that's a huge part of it, no question. I mean, we spend over $1 trillion a year if you count up like all the costs maintaining this empire, which we were never supposed to have, which the American people have never even gotten a vote on. They never once held a referendum saying, do you guys not want to be a republic anymore? Do you want to be an empire? Do you want to be responsible for whether the Donbass region is ruled by Kiev or Moscow or whatever, have 700 bases around the world or any of this stuff? And we've spent something like $8 trillion on these disastrous wars in the last 20 plus years. So that is a huge part of it. But all the entitlements are also going bankrupt. And there's a lot of other waste in government spending. It's not just the warfare state. And look, Anna pointed out Medicaid, which fair enough, that is an actual redistributive policy that helps poorer people. But Medicare and Social Security are both gigantic transfers of wealth from poorer groups to wealthier groups. And they just absolutely make no sense at all. The young people in America today are coming out of college with 6 figures in debt. They're getting a job at DoorDash and living at their mom's until they're in their 30s. And they're responsible now with their DoorDash money to contribute to the senior citizens generation who have owned property and have participated in the greatest economic expansion in world history. They essentially become a millionaire because they bought a house in the 80s or something like that. I mean, it's just totally indefensible. And I think that's something that progressives got to wake up on. That, like, what are we doing here? Okay, maybe this was your vision in the 30s or in the 60s, but this just makes absolutely no sense in the current context of America. These are giant redistributions toward wealthier groups from poorer groups. And I've heard a lot of political theorists talk about redistribution of wealth. I've never heard one justify that.
Well, okay. I mean, look, this could take up a lot of time. I know we don't have a lot of time, but let me just say one quick thing.
Left with Dave. And when I'm going back and forth,
I'm going to have to drop it, but I'll just
go ahead.
I'll come on Young Turks and we can argue this all out.
I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, Anna, you get last thought on this one because we literally have 10 minutes with him, and I want to get to the New York mayoral race. So
yeah, I mean, look, when you're talking about Medicaid and Social Security, you're talking about universal programs, right? Younger generations help fund these programs that elderly people and disabled people are able to use to their advantage, right? But elderly people paid into the system and helped the people who were older than them previously. I think the problem with Social Security specifically, though, is that you're right that there is an unfairness to the system, meaning that there is a cap on the amount of your income that gets taxed for Social Security. The vast majority of American workers never hit that cap. I believe it's at like around $170,000. After that amount of income, you're no longer taxed for Social Security. And that is putting the Social Security program at jeopardy, which is why progressives argue you need to raise the cap. It's not fair that for the vast majority of workers, all of their income gets taxed for Social Security because they never hit that cap. But for the tremendously wealthy, I mean, not even tremendously wealthy, you're making $200,000. There's a certain portion of your income that doesn't get taxed for Social Security. I think we need to lift that cap. Social Security is an incredibly important universal program. It's considered the third rail in American politics because of how popular it is, and it literally keeps elderly people off our streets. So I disagree with you, Dave, on this issue, but we should have a lengthier debate about it at some point.
Okay, but if you're taking from a poor group to give into a richer group, you're keeping more people off the streets by taking from that poorer group. And look, whatever, we could debate this whole thing later.
Thank you so much for watching Her Take. If you like the show, can you help us out by subscribing to the channel, clicking the notification button, sharing, commenting, joining the conversation? It helps us out a ton with the algorithm. We appreciate you.